Press.
All right. Good evening. It is March 7th, 2022. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting is being conducted in a combination of being in the town room and remote means. Given that we have a quorum of the council present, I'm calling the March 7, 2022 meeting of the Amherst Town Council to order at 6:31. I'll call upon each councilor by name. At that time, they should unmute, say present. This will let us know you can hear us and we can hear you. And then please remember to mute your mic again. Shalini Balmilne is not present yet. Okay. Pat DeAngelis.
Present.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Present.
Lynn Griesmer is present. Mandy Jo Haneke.
Present.
Anika Lopes.
Present.
Michelle Miller.
Present.
Dorothy Pam.
Here.
Pam Rooney.
Present.
Kathy Shane.
Here.
Andy Steinberg.
Present.
Jennifer Taub.
Present.
Alicia Walker.
Present.
Okay, there's no chat room for the meeting. If you have technical issues, please let Athena and me know. We will decide to do at that time, what to do at that time, and if we have to stop the meeting or just make a note of it in the minutes. I'd like to stop for just a moment as we think about the people in Ukraine and mention that next week, no, 2 weeks from now, we will have a resolution before the council in support of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. And in addition to that, our town manager has secured a Ukrainian flag, which we will be able to fly from the town hall. Okay. There's many announcements about upcoming meetings. And specifically, I want to make sure for those of you that are following the elementary school, that there are 3 meetings this week that you want to make note of. The elementary school committee will meet tomorrow at 6:30. The building committee will hold a community forum on Wednesday at 6:30. And then the elementary school building committee will meet on Friday at 8:30 in the morning. One other thing is to note that on Thursday night, it's a busy week, the Town Services and Outreach Committee will hold a joint meeting with the Town Council. And during that time, we will do a public hearing on permit parking regulations. Kathy?
I just want to underscore what Lynn said about the elementary building, that the school committee meeting is a vote on the education program. And then Friday's building committee is a vote. So we're at the first phase of the grant authorities process.
Thank you. Then I would like to, there's no hearings tonight, so we're going to move to public comment. I'd like to ask any person who would like to make public comment to raise your hand at this time. I will remind people again of this, and then at some point we will declare that we are only going to call on all of those hands raised. But tonight, you're welcome to make public comment. We do not comment back. We will allow 3 minutes for public comment. And the first person is, and please correct me if I have not pronounced your name correctly, Matea Kramer. Please enter the room, state your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Matea Kramer. Are you able to hear me?
We can, thank you.
And I am on East Pleasant Street in Amherst. My pronouns are she, her, and I want to make a comment about the African Heritage Reparation Assembly, which is working under a charter that expires just 15 months from now. As you know, The Assembly is also charged with developing a community-wide reconciliation process for what is 400 years of human rights violations. To put such a time boundary on this work has the potential to undermine the reconciliation process, because in order to be legitimate, the process requires extensive community input and engagement, which takes a great deal of time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment and for joining us. Are there any other public comments at this time? This is the only public comment period. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to the consent agenda. It's very long. Listen carefully. And also to just remember that if you pull something off, we will come back to it later. And at that time, you will be asked why you asked to pull that item off. The following items were selected because they were considered to be routine and to pass with no controversy. To remove an item, you'll tell me that after I read through the full set of items. It does not require a second. The motion is the following: to move the following items and the printed motions thereunder and approve those items as a single unit. Suspension of Town Council Rules of Procedure 8.4 for the following agenda items. This allows us to vote tonight. 8F, authorization for Town Council President to submit testimony on behalf of the Town Council for the following items: Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, public hearings on new stretch building energy code proposal. And 2, regarding an act relative to payment in lieu of taxation by organizations exempt from property tax bills, Senate 1874 and House 3080. Waiver of Town Council Rules of Procedure 8.6 for agenda item 9A1, approval of town manager appointment committee responders for equity, safety, and service, CREST director. 6A, adoption of a resolution calling on President Joe Biden to immediately cancel all student debt. 6B, adoption of a proclamation of congratulations to the Amherst Regional High School girls swimming and diving team. 8B, referral to Town Services and Outreach Committee for conversation and possible recommendation on the topic of economic development and use of public space. 8F1, authorization of Town Council President to submit testimony on behalf of Town Council regarding the new stretch building energy code proposal. 8F2, authorization of Town Council President to submit testimony on behalf of Town Council regarding act relative to payment in lieu of taxation by organizations exempt from property tax bills, Senate 1874 and House 3080. And 9A1, approval of town manager's appointment of Director of Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service, CRESS. I see several hands. I'm going to start with Pat DeAngelis.
Thank you, Lynn. I would like to have the 6A, the adoption of the resolution calling on President Biden to cancel student debt, be withdrawn. I've been in conversation with the other sponsors and with Councilor Steinberg, who's offered some strong critique and is interested in working with us to refine and the resolution. So we would like to remove it from the evening's proceedings, and knowing that we'll be bringing it back in a week or to the next council meeting.
Thank you. It is removed. Andy Steinberg.
I have one additional request, and that is to remove 8F2, authorization of the Town Council President to submit testimony on behalf of the Town Council regarding the act relative to payment in lieu of taxation by organizations exempt from property tax from the consent agenda.
And we'll speak to that later. Okay, are there any other hands at this time? Seeing none, then except for those items that have been removed, and I'm going to ask that you read up there. The ones that have been withdrawn is 6A, adoption of resolution calling on President Joe Biden to immediately cancel all student debt. And the one that we will discuss later and is not therefore on the consent agenda is 8F2, authorization of town council president to submit testimony on behalf of town council regarding acts relative to payment in lieu of taxation, et cetera. I do want to note that we still are leaving suspension of town council rule 8.4 for that item on, which means later we can vote. Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Haneke.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, then I'm going to begin with Shalini Balmeld. Still, Shalini has not shown up. Is that correct?
No, she's not here yet.
Okay. Pat DeAngelis,
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Mandy Jo Haneke,
Aye.
Anika Lopes,
Aye.
Michelle Miller,
Yes.
Dorothy Pam,
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg,
Yes.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, 12 in favor with 1 absent. Okay. I am going to ask that we pause for a moment and with regard to the proclamation congratulating the Amherst Regional High School girls swimming and diving team, Anna and Alicia, you were the sponsors. Would one of you please read the final paragraph?
Alicia, do you want me to do it or would you like to do it?
Alicia, would you like Anna to read it or would you like to?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I said, Anna, you can go ahead. Thank you.
She pointed. Okay. Now, therefore, we, the town council of the town of Amherst, do hereby recognize and congratulate the Amherst Regional High School girls swimming and diving team on their historic and tremendous accomplishment of winning the MIAA Division II State Swim Championship, the first ever state title for the program.
And we
Well
will,
done.
several of us will get to congratulate them in person later this week. All right, we're moving on to presentations and discussions. Laura Drucker has joined us. Laura, is she here? Yes. Welcome, Laura. Laura is the chair of the Energy and Climate Action Committee. The report was an annual summary report that's required by their charge. And Laura is here to give us some brief highlights of that report and answer any questions. So Laura?
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Thank you all for having me. So yes, we submitted in February the ECAC 2021 annual report. You can see if you look through it, there's quite a lot of information provided in terms of measures we've taken to reduce emissions and build resiliency. There's also some, and most of these measures are measures that were taken by the town and through, in particular, the work of Stephanie Ciccarella, who can really be credited for all of these. But what I want to do today is I just want to read the intro out loud here because I think it really encapsulates sort of what ECAC was feeling about our year in review for 2021. So the ECAC committee is pleased to report on our work in 2021. Despite the disruption of the pandemic, our committee met every other week and successfully submitted the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, which we've called CARP for better or for worse, of climate action in the near term, the road to 2025 and beyond, that will be necessary for the town of Amherst to meet the ambitious targets adopted by the town council in 2019. We are very encouraged that the council directed the town manager to implement the plan and that he will be providing you with regular updates. We are also thankful to the town staff who participated in the development of the plan. And it is great to hear from Stephanie that many are finding the CARP useful as they plan for future years. The town has a number of funding avenues to accomplish implementation, from the capital budget, state and federal grants, and the ARPA program. The town has indicated that all of the ARPA funds, totaling approximately $12 million, should be implemented with a racial equity and climate lens. We are excited that the town can now make a serious investment in climate action in order to achieve our town goals of emissions 25% below 2016 levels by 2025 and 50% by 2030. In addition, the town can encourage CPAC and other granting authorities to use funding opportunities that are integrated with climate priorities. An example would be funding energy efficiency retrofits and multifamily apartment complexes. We hope that as we move into the implementation phase, ECAC can be seen as a resource to the council to help ensure the climate lens is applied and provide any resources or support during the budgeting process. We look forward to meeting with the new council and determining the best process to move forward with this engagement. And we would welcome any new members with questions about ECAC or CARP to reach out. And I know many of our members have already had conversations with many of the new members. Additionally, we are excited to support town staff as needed and through Stephanie to help do research, help prioritize projects, form work groups, and identify outreach and policy levers that will support implementation. As noted in our 2020 report, a major theme in the CARP is our belief that the town needs to take our climate future into account in all decisions, particularly focusing on environmental justice initiatives that serve Black, Indigenous, and people of color and low-income community members as we reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase Amherst's climate resiliency. We emphasize this area as a priority and would welcome collaboration with the council, town staff, and other committees and community groups to ensure we address and mitigate any effects on the vulnerable. My last point I'll make is, just last week, the IPCC came out with another new report showing that we have a very small but enclosing window to take action on climate before we have irreparable damage to our environment that will cost many, many more dollars and lives and ecosystems than we could even imagine. The goals that the town council approved in 2019 are aligned with what the science says we need to do to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And ECAC stands by on the ready to help make sure that we can implement those goals in a way that supports a just and thriving economy for the Amherst of the future. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Before we do that, I also want to recognize that we've brought Stephanie Ciccarella into the room. Stephanie is the sustainability coordinator and as recognized, does a terrific job doing many of that. I also want to thank ECAC. Can never get that acronym out right. For the recent work that you did in responding to the gas industry and helping shape the response for the town to forward. So with that, I'm going to ask Kathy Shane, you have a question.
Well, Kathy, I think you're on mute.
Yep.
It's actually a comment, Lynn. If you want to take questions first, I can wait.
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, I just want to thank Laura and Stephanie for the leadership you've taken, and particularly the extra effort to come to the Net Zero Subcommittee meetings of the Elementary School Building Committee. That show of support from a broader Amherst community for the what would be our first net zero building on both what it means for setting the pace for other buildings and keeping us focused on the broader climate initiatives. You've both spoken eloquently, and I hope you will keep coming. It will be important for the support of the project. And I know it's an extra effort to get to these meetings, but it's really appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Anna.
So I actually have a question, I think maybe for Mandy Jo, I'm not sure. So reading the town manager's report, you saw, and I'm jumping the gun, spoiler alert. You're on a regionalization committee through MMA, and I'm phrasing that right.
Correct.
Thank you. So is this, there are some, I don't know what that committee does, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. So there are some things in here that talk about a regional effort and then the need for regional coordination. And I'm curious if there's any crossover and how climate action is playing into your work on that committee. And I'm happy to wait until the town manager report on that, but it is a question that pertained to both. So I'm asking it here as well.
May I?
Please.
So the committee I'm on is the Municipal and Regional Administration Committee. And so we talk about items that deal with, administration of municipal governments and all. And we generally talk about things that are already in the State House bill-wise. So we have a meeting coming up this Thursday, actually. I can ask if there's any climate sustainable bills, sustainability bills that relate to regional working together during that meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll also maybe recommend if Laura, if you know of any as well, it would be great to pass that along too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then I want to thank both Laura and Stephanie for joining us and for the outstanding work you're all doing. Take care. Thanks. All right, then we're going to move on to the second presentation and discussion item. This is not requiring nor will there be a vote by the council. This is the draft solar siting and solar bylaw working group charge. And I'm going to call on Paul Bachman. We'll actually put the charge up on the screen.
Thank you, Lynn. So first, the cover memo sort of summarizes that this was an initiative that actually came from the council and response to the proposed solar development, and became apparent that the town does not have a solar bylaw, typically a zoning bylaw, in its books. And one of the things that with the initiative for the moratorium, one of the initiatives from the council also was, let's do a solar zoning, a solar bylaw. So I put together this solar bylaw working group that would have a charge of utilizing the site assessment work that we will be contracting with to develop a solar zoning bylaw that it would then present to the planning board and to the town council for its consideration. We tried to include the various committees that have direct impact, including the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, the Energy and Climate Action Committee, and the other committee. And water, should be Water Supply Protection Committee. And then have two residents who have some experience with solar or forestry work, because this is where a lot of the large solar, ground-mounted solar would go. We've also, there have been suggestions made in terms of engaging the farming community, because many of the solar installations are on agricultural land. So we'd want to engage with that community as well. So this is a draft. I wanted to share it with you. Welcome any feedback that you have. And we'll review it again and then get this up and running and start to advertise for participation.
Are there questions? Anna?
I have a number of questions and comments. So I'm going to go through one and then let Mandy Jo go and then keep going in case, so I'm not talking for an hour. So first thing, the solar resource assessment or the solar study is not really in the charge so much anymore for this working group. And there's not detail around what's the vision for the assessment, who shapes the questions that are asked, what's the time frame for getting started or completing that. And this matters to the completion of the bylaw. And so if the working group is not doing the assessment, I'd love clarity around your vision for that siting study and the bylaw working group and how they're going to play together, especially given that the one of the charges or one of the results, not results, the things that the working group is supposed to give at the end of it includes that map of resource areas. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that relationship.
Sure.
Paul, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. So typically what happens is when we engage a consultant, the staff person, in this case, it'd be Stephanie Ciccarello, is the one who manages the consultant so that there is a clear client for the consultant. When we do the RFP, that clearly will be shared with ECAC and with this committee. If it's up and running, we'd like to share it with them. When we go through the interview process, we'll ask for representatives from the various committees to sit in on the interviews so we have full participation. We want this work product to support the work of the solar working group, the solar bylaw working group. And so I think that that's the cleanest way for us to move forward on it.
Okay. And I'll come back to you. Mandy Jo?
Yeah, I have two things. The first one is the composition. I know there have been some individuals that have indicated they don't want to see any industry representative on this body or anyone that seeks industry, but in dealing with the hearings related to the moratorium, one thing I learned was that it's extremely important where solar goes because there's only certain sites. They have to be within certain distances of certain types of electrical generation or substations and all. And so I'm concerned that there's a lack of sort of that type of representation on a committee that is going to produce a map on where things can go, because I'm very concerned that that map will ignore the realities of what's possible based on where our electrical supply systems are right now. And then the second one is, in reading this charge, it seemed to be missing to me any statement that solar is an important part of Amherst meeting its climate action goals. It has statements about a need to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community members, the environment, and natural resources, but never any statements in some sense that we also need massive amounts of solar to, meet our climate action goals and the IPCC and to transition to renewables. And that concerns me because there are two different thoughts about solar. One is don't put it on forest land because forests are important, and others are we need to transition to renewables as quickly as possible and with massive amounts of solars. And I will admit those are somewhat at odds, but this one doesn't seem to address the need for massive amounts of solar in our country.
So I could look at existing documents that the council has already approved, like the master plan and resolutions that the town has looked at, incorporate some of those statements in as a sort of a founding baseline for beginning. I mean, I think I trust this group to be representative of the town. They're all been appointed to serve in certain capacities. In terms of industry representation, I think that the consultant will have that experience and that siting ability. We do have people who work, I believe, in the industry who already serve on the Conservation Commission who may want to participate. I don't want to exclude people from the industry on it, but I don't think we have to purposely include people on it.
Pam?
Thanks. One of the things that I was hoping to see was a little bit tighter time frame. And I think I suggested that the process be wrapped up and a vote to be ready for town council at the end of the time period, not just presenting a bylaw for consideration by the end of the time frame. So that's pretty different. That's several months prior to just producing a bylaw.
So we did have March 7th. I think that was in the original motion from last week for the council. And because this committee can only present something to the planning board and to the town council, what happens with it after that, they can't control that. So we need to confine this charge for this group to what this group can accomplish. We chose May 31 mainly to allow ample time for the committee to do its work, thinking if the money for a consultant doesn't become available to July 1, we have to contract, they have to do the work, 6 months of doing the work, and just a little bit worried that if they have to have something in by March 7th, they might not be enough time to really understand what this study had said. So rather than coming back to the council, we could do it either way. We could say, we could put an earlier date on it to sort of press the urgency of it with a report back, but with the full knowledge that they may ask for additional time. So however, I'm pretty open to that, whatever the council would like to see on that.
Anna, I'm going to go to Anika.
Thank you, Lynn. Two questions, if they could be answered at this point, if it's not too early. One is for the incoming residents that would have some experience in solar and or forestry, are there further guidelines with that, qualifications or years of experience? And second, would this committee have wiggle room amongst themselves to push up deadlines or alter deadlines, even if they thought they needed less or more time than suggested if they wanted?
So we tend to not put in more detailed qualifications for the resident members. So we don't exclude someone who might have some kind of experience that might not be directly, that might be beneficial to us. And what we do for those two positions, we'll do a recall for people who would like to volunteer, do interviews, including someone from the Residents Advisory Committee and Stephanie Ciccarello is the staff person, and then make the appointments. Then those appointments would come to the council for your review. So I think keeping it a little bit broader, letting people put their names forward, because there's a lot of people who've learned a lot during the process and have a lot of that kind of experience that they would bring to the table. In terms of setting the deadlines, I think that's something that would be in the charge that only the town manager would change, but I think we want to align the deadlines for the charge with the council's work and what the council would be ready to take on the zoning bylaw change.
I just want to briefly add my voice to trying to move the deadline forward back to the March 6th that was originally discussed. And the reason is for several reasons. One is I do not want to see us have another November and December like we did last year. The second thing is that still means there's going to be about 3 more months before there's a bylaw, because it will take that long to have all the hearings and so forth and come back to the council and legal review, et cetera. So it's just to add my voice to that desire. Michelle?
It doesn't appear that there will be a counselor on this committee. So my question is, will there be a counselor liaison? Is that, have you thought about that? Or
The council can decide if there will be a liaison.
so when we get to vote on this, that will be a separate
Right.
discussion. Got
Yes.
it. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Anna?
All
Back to
right,
you.
you ready? Okay, question 2. If the working group is quote unquote reviewing the assessment, question about, is that prior to it being, so in the charge, it lists that the working group will review the solar assessment. Is that prior to it being conducted or after it is conducted?
So I would ask the working group to review the RFP as a key document in this. So we'd want the working group to look at that, because that will drive what the consultant actually does. So that's the document I'd want them to review.
And that was part B, was can they have input on the RFP?
Yep.
And if not the working group, I'd like ECAC to have input on the RFP.
They both can.
I'm going to try to get through a couple if that's okay, Lynn. So next, I'd love to see a reference to environmental justice and the importance of that work in the charge specifically. This committee needs to consider implications on historically and currently marginalized populations. I also would love to see reference to agricultural implications in the charge itself. Could I do one more? and then come back to me?
Please go ahead.
All right. This 7 voting members makes sense to me. I think that feels like a reasonable number. And in looking at who's on it, I'd love to recommend having voting members and then having certain folks who can give input and feedback on drafts, but not necessarily be part of the full committee. And I don't know how to phrase that, but here's my thinking. Board of Health, for example, has great feedback, might have great feedback on specific components of a draft, but they might not have a lot to contribute in terms of things like, the decommissioning. I'm using examples, right? Hypotheticals. So I'm curious about if there's a role for specifically Board of Health, Fire Department, and potentially the Wetlands Administrator to be reviewers versus on the committee, but to have a set time where they provide comment and feedback and input. I'll stop there.
So all the committee is a public committee. All of its meetings are open to the public. I've received comments on this draft already from members of the public. I don't think we're going to have members of the public hesitant to convey their opinions. Great idea about including certain department heads, any department heads who the committee or the sustainability coordinator feels is necessary. We've named the planning director, but wetlands administrator, the fire chief, others in town would be valuable in getting their input. I don't think that necessarily needs to be in the charge, but I can add something that would say relevant department heads or something like that. That's a good idea. But I think, these documents will all be in packets like your documents are. The RFP, the draft RFP will be out there for people to comment on. And I think that would be we'll welcome any comments like that.
Anna, continue.
Okay. So what you said about the RFP, I've concerns about timeline, and I think they might be actually a little different than what Lynn and Pam said. Not that I disagree with them, but we're now looking at a process of interviewing residents to sit on this. We're now looking at a process to give feedback on an RFP before it goes out by a committee that's not yet formed. So this keeps getting pushed back and back in my mind. And so I'm curious about whether this committee is the appropriate committee to be looking at an RFP, or if that is better suited in ECAC specifically for the siting study RFP. And then, sorry, so that's part one. Part two is, are we delaying this process by multiple weeks by going through the interview process for resident members?
So we can't sign a contract till July 1. There's no money. So the money won't become available. The work can't begin until July 1. So we have three and a half months. It will take time to set up the committee. It'll take time for each of the committees that are sending committees to designate someone from their committee. I don't think we're losing a ton of time in this setting up the committee and getting it started. A bigger challenge, I think, might be making sure people are able to work during the summer. Many people, it's sometimes hard to get groups together during August. So I think that, hopefully the siting group can be doing their work during the summer and then have a lot of information back when they come back in the fall. So if your concern is, are we going to be able to meet the deadlines? I don't know, because if we change it back to the March deadline as at least a report back, and with that being the goal of getting a bylaw, they'll have a lot of work to do in a relatively short period of time.
I'm going to go to Dorothy, and then if there's more questions on it, come back.
Can I have
Dorothy?
it's a follow-up. I actually have no more questions.
Okay, please do the follow-up then.
Paul, I thought there was 100,000 in the budget this year for the siting study. Is that not, it's not until July 1 that becomes available?
I thought, well, I'll double check. I thought the money was scheduled for FY23.
Okay.
That's a different set of money. Dorothy.
Why is it not possible to have a council member on the committee?
It is possible, but I've not put one on.
Well, I think Anna would be, I just think Anna would be a great addition to the committee.
There's no doubt, but I find that it's usually better to have the committee. It's a pretty time intensive committee, and asking the committee to do its work. Council members all can attend any of the meetings that they choose. they're all open to the public. And that sort of leaves it to the discretion of the council to make, if the individual councilors to participate.
Andy?
Commenting on two things. One on what was just being discussed. I think that our experience in the prior council had been that it is awkward at times to have counselors as members of committees for various reasons, but mostly because if the committee is coming up with something that's ultimately going to be presented to the committee, to the council itself, and require council action, then those counselors actually are having two times that they can participate and make decisions, and it creates an awkwardness. And we had this discussion in the last council fairly substantially around whether it was appropriate to have counselors continue as members of ECAC. I just wanted to remind my fellow counselors of that. And earlier at the very beginning of this discussion, there was a suggestion made that there be a solar industry representative possibly on the group. And I am uncomfortable with that idea because I think that the person who's in that role can provide very valuable information to the committee through various means, including public comment. But it would seem equivalent to the anxiety that was being expressed when we were creating the community safety working group to having somebody from the police department as a member of the CSWG, as opposed to being a resource to the CSWG. So those are my two comments. Thank you.
Dorothy, you still have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to say that Kathy is on the school building committee, and I'm very glad that she is. And I feel that all of the hours and hours of work and research that she does and reports back to the council, I feel that is extremely valuable for me as a council member. So I just want to say sometimes I think it's really good to have a counselor working very hard and intensively on something that is key. That's it.
Kathy, I'm going to call on you because you seemed to pop up on this issue.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Dorothy's comment. I think it's a very different situation. The building committee actually is a voting entity, and we are going to have to take an action on behalf of the town on a building, and the council then has a separate role, which is the financing role of the building. So there's a clear separation between the two roles. So it's my privilege to be on it, and it's an incredible amount of work, but I think it's very different than developing a bylaw. I see them as quite distinct functions.
Anna, you still have your hand up?
I do. Sorry, I was crossing them off as I went, and I have one left. Respectfully, to weigh in on that last thing, I mean, I think Dorothy, thank you. That's an honor that you would mention me. And if we were going to add another person on this, it should be a second member from ECAC. It shouldn't be me. I think that this is where I, as the liaison to ECAC, should be reporting back on their progress when they report back to their committee. So that's my take on that. The other last question, Paul, is what staff is supporting this working group? And I want to make sure it's clear that it's not a committee, it's a working group, right? And so what staff is supporting it? Will they self-appoint a chair? So and the reason I'm asking that is looking at this group, one member from planning board will probably have experience writing bylaws. Other members may not. How are we making sure that what comes out of this working group looks like a bylaw, sounds like a bylaw? Who's chairing it?
Excellent questions. So the Stephanie Ciccarello will be the lead staff person, explicitly supported by the planning director or her designee. I'm not sure how much more Chris can take on, but we do need that expertise from the planning department. We also will have access to the town attorney in terms of writing something that looks and smells and presents to you as a zoning bylaw. So in terms of who chairs, that will be up to the committee. Usually the committee chooses its chair. And what was the third thing?
I think you got them all.
Okay.
Staff, chair. How is this gonna smell
And
like
there's no
bylaw?
distinction. I mean, there's no, working group is just a moniker. It's not really a different, it's still a public body. They have to post their meetings. There's no real difference in terms of the open meeting law. It just implies that this is not an ongoing committee. In my mind, that's why I call it a working group, is that they're charged with doing something in particular and get finished with it and then dissolve. And so it's
Thank
not
you.
seen as being something that would continue on, but they are still open to all the open meeting law posting requirements. And if they set up a subcommittee of even 2 people to go off and do something, those meetings have to be posted as well.
Thank you for clarifying.
Community Safety Working Group was the most recent
Yeah.
and very
Mhm.
successful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments? Then Paul, I think you've heard from the council on this one.
Thank you so much. And if anybody
Thank
has
you.
comments afterwards, please send them to me.
Okay, thank you. We are going to move on to action items. The first action item is based on the motion that was left on the table, actually was postponed, and I'm going to call on Anna first.
Sure. Seems kind of irrelevant now, so I would like to withdraw this motion.
And who was the second on that motion? Kathy?
Yep, I'm
You okay
happy.
with withdrawing?
Absolutely.
Excellent. We're done with action item A. We're going on to African Heritage Reparations Assembly, request for proposed legislation. C. And we have several people who are joining us for this piece, for the presentation only, but not for the debate of the council. And I believe they are Hala Lord, also Alexis Reed and Amakar Shabazz. Oh, and Jen Royston, please bring her in as well. Okay. Right, Michelle, please proceed.
Thank you. I want to start by sharing my deep gratitude to the members of the African Heritage Reparation Assembly. Heather Hala Lord, Yvonne Mendez, Alexis Reed, Irv Rhodes, and Amokar Shabazz for their commitment to bringing about repair and healing to our community, and for holding a vision of a more equitable and just Amherst. I also want to thank our staff liaison, Jennifer Moisten, who wears so many hats and is so generous with her time and her wisdom. Working with this group for the past 6 months has been one of the most humbling and rewarding experiences of my life. I'm grateful every minute for the opportunity I've been given and the trust my AHRA colleagues have put in me. As a preamble to the presentation on the memo in your packet, we wanted to bring forward the resolution signed by our Town Council President, Lynn Geismer, on December 7th, 2020. A resolution affirming the town of Amherst's commitment to end structural racism and achieve racial equity for Black residents. To remind us what the town committed to, and more importantly, to breathe life into the resolution by hearing the voices of residents with direct experience living in Amherst as an African heritage person. I'm going to call on 3 members who are here with us to reflect on one of the whereas statements in the resolution. And we're going to start with Hala.
Thank you. Whereas, since its inception, the town of Amherst has enacted, supported, and permitted official and unofficial policies and practices that have perpetuated the fallacy of white supremacy, that have caused serious harm to members of the Black community, and have fostered a persistent racial equity gap in town. And that is the end of the whereas, and I will just give you a moment of my reflection, having moved to Amherst as an infant and experienced the school systems as a child, as a parent, as an ABC resident director, as a teacher, and as a school adjustment counselor. The harm is consistent and persistent. It's often unintended, but we need to, or I hope that we are committed to really unpacking that, looking at each of these things and working towards never again, not just never again, but guarantee of no repeat. Thank you.
Thank you, Hala. And Alexis?
Oh man, I am going to not be as brief as that. Thank you, Hala. So mine is whereas the Amherst Town Council acknowledges the trauma inflicted on Blacks by persistent white supremacist ideology results in physiological harm affecting educational, economic, health, and social outcomes and conjures painful memories of our town's past, not only for those who lived through these experiences, but also for the generations that have followed. My statement reads as follows. My family first arrived in Amherst when my uncle Arthur Wilkins was accepted into Amherst College in 1968. He would graduate with the class of 1972 as my other uncle and my mother and my grandparents moved into Puffton Village and then shortly after into Townhouse of Amherst. My grandfather, Jim DeShields, worked as the special assistant to the chancellor of the University of Massachusetts, who at the time was Bill Brommery. My grandmother, meanwhile, was getting her education degree at the same institution, and my mother attended Marks Meadow. By 1973, my grandmother, Shirley DeShields, was the acting director of the Communication Skills Center at UMass. In 1975, my family purchased our beloved home on Hulst Road, built brand new by Larry Miller of D.H. Jones Real Estate. In the same year, my uncle Michael graduated from Amherst Regional High School. My mother then attended Crocker Farm. Fast forward to 1991 at Cooley Dickinson Hospital, where I am brought into the world. At this point, my grandmother is the director of the James Baldwin Scholars Program at Hampshire College, where I would go on to study and graduate from in 2015. My mother moved us into Rolling Green, where I would find my first sense of community amongst the kids of color there. My uncle Michael, meanwhile, opened the first Black-owned barbershop of Amherst named My Place. In 2001, as I was attending school at Fort River in the building that used to be called East Street, my grandmother opened up her own private therapy practice called Interventions. She serviced those with blended families, biracial youth, and needs for accessing gender-affirming surgeries, just to name a few. I was raised with a strong sense of connectedness to community, as well as a need to share resources and power. I was raised in a family that had a lot of privileges compared to many of our peers, but there was always an importance placed on using those resources and privileges to uplift others. With that being said, whose responsibility is it to uplift and support the diversity of our community? Is the onus on Black folks to do the work to cure white supremacy in our community? Who can speak to whose community? Who can reach them? In my junior year of high school at Amherst Regional High, roughly 2009, I took an African-American literature class taught by a currently employed, beloved, and progressive white teacher. When the African-American students, greatly outnumbered by our white peers, voiced our concerns of the N-word being read aloud by our non-Black classmates, that it was triggering and that censoring the word shouldn't affect our ability to learn the content, our teacher suggested that we should take a vote on whether or not the N-word should be read in class. This is who is shaping our youth. How many times did those in power ignore us when we told you Mr. Garney was being wildly inappropriate with us? How long will the testimonies of our community be reduced to a need to behave and assimilate? You, with the power to change it, must be critical of the power dynamic that we have forced Amherst youth to take part in. Anti-Blackness permeates every aspect of a Black person's life, starting from the moment they take their very first breath until the moment they take their last. We are talking about children that we raised in this system who we are failing. We are talking about children that we raised in this system that move through it and cannot afford to live in this town upon graduation, or have to find jobs outside of Amherst. I can only dream of owning a property in the only town I have ever worked in, ever lived in, and ever gone to school in. We are talking about how much police presence there is in Mill Valley or Colonial Village, a majority BIPOC and low-income community that I have lived in for 2 years, and how rarely you see cops at places like Office Park Apartments. There are monuments we can build, songs we can sing, and proclamations we can shout at the top of mountaintops that will not amount to anything tangible. It's realizing that Black people were identified as Blacks 4 times in this document about systemic racism, but white people were not identified as whites one single time. It's getting to know ourselves and our biases in every single interaction we have. The work begins with us as individuals, knowing the roles we have and the weight we carry in our community. It's listening to the community that has, for decades, felt so marginalized and pushed outside of out of the life that is so desirable for those that choose to move here. I have been a part of this community my entire life. My mother has been a part of this community since she was a toddler. My family became a part of this community off the heels of intense racial violence across the nation in the 1960s. Too many of them did not survive to speak their truth, so I am here to report on their behalf that regardless of the titles, the degrees, and the accolades, Black folks, my family, are not pictured in the advertised image of Amherst amongst the colonial-style homes and the sprawling greenery. When you hear that over half of the Black population in Amherst lives below the poverty line, what do you feel compelled to do that is woven into the fabric of what you do every day? Because this is life for Amherst residents every single day. Sharing space without sharing power is tokenization. How will each of us leave here with an intent to share power in our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. And Dr. Shabazz?
Wow. Amherst Delinda Est. My whereas, despite the long history of civic, cultural, and economic engagement and participation of Black residents in the town of Amherst, there are almost no town of Amherst streets, parks, or buildings named after people of African heritage. This is in our power to fix, and this must be fixed if we are to decolonize and move toward a revolutionary future together. This legislation, getting the special purpose home rule power from the state, must be moved forward to move forward on anything else we may yet propose. And I thank you and offer our assistance in your deliberations regarding this measure.
Thank you, Dr. Shabazz. And Jennifer, I just want to give you, if you have anything that you'd like to add, please do.
Well, I wasn't, oh, can you hear me?
No pressure.
I was feeling a little bit pressured, and I just want to say thank you to all of the AHRA members for speaking. Alexis, wow, that was really powerful. Thank you for being so bold to stand up. It's much appreciated. And again, I just want to thank the AHRA members, and it's a pleasure to be working with them.
Great. So we hope at a future presentation that we'll be able to engage counselors in reading the Be It Further Resolved, just as a way of bringing forward the resolution again and again to remind us. So at this time, I think we will, because of open meeting law stuff, we need to move the assembly members into the audience, and then the council will continue with the discussion. So thank you very much for being here, assembly members.
Thank you for joining us tonight. It was terrific. Very, very moving. Thank you. Let me take a moment and do that. Actually, you can continue, Michelle.
Thank you. So I really wanted to just give as much time as possible for counselors to ask questions. I'm hopeful that everyone had a chance to review the memo in the packet. I'm happy to review it, but if everyone's already had a chance to look at it, I really just wanted to open it up for discussion to see what questions there were, if there were any points of clarification that I might be able to address. So I'll just pause there and we can see what counselors have.
Are there questions at this time? Anna?
I only have one. So everyone's surprised here. Michelle, in the step-by-step process in the memo AHRA home rule, it says the home rule petition will be drafted by the town and its legal counsel. Specifically, who within the town are you envisioning would support drafting that?
Well, it's my understanding that Paul would work with the town attorney to draft it, and that would be in coordination with the AHRA. So I think the motion that we're bringing forward includes the AHRA being part of, or at least it being consulted throughout that process.
Great. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Let me also mention that in preparation for this, I think it was back in the late fall, maybe it was in January, time flies when you're having fun. Michelle and Paul and I were able to meet with our town attorney and review that process so that she was able to then bring that to the committee. Okay. Dorothy.
Okay. This is for me, but also as a stand-in for the public. I read the document 1 or 2 days ago, and I understand that there's no law that would allow us at present to take public money to use for specific reparations. And then I underlined some parts. It's essential that the town prioritize activities that will ensure reparation benefits can legally be distributed, provide the most possible agency and flexibility with respect to reparative initiatives chosen by the African-American Black community. It just kept feeling very vague to me. So like, what kind of statement or law would allow us to do some of the things that we've kind of talked casually about? For example, we've talked about perhaps doing something to enable and increase Black home ownership. Okay. So I'm just kind of not quite sure what it is that they can do and that we need to do. I'd like to have somebody state it clearly. Thank you.
Michelle, I'm going to suggest that along with you, Paul may want to speak to this as well.
Yeah, and just so I understand that I heard you right, Dorothy, you're asking what the language in the bill would include? Or are you? Go ahead.
What kind of words or bill can get around the fact that there's a need for this in the first place? So how are you going to, yes, really, I want to know how it can be done, because I'm really excited to have reparations done. And I know we have to do it legally, but I'm curious to know what the formula or what the wording would be at such a bylaw.
I think first it's important to recognize, and I would encourage anyone to look at the KP Law opinion, because I think it's very comprehensive if you haven't had a chance to look at it. And it's important to note that the council actually outlined 3 pathways that are possible. So this is no guarantee for us, but there are 2 other pathways that are available to us. So in terms of specific language, and I think when we spoke with Lauren at KP Law, Lauren already has some thoughts, I think, about the language that she would include. But what we're trying to do is to define reparations as a public purpose. And so from Laura's point of view, it was important not to be too specific, but not to be too broad in these bills as well. So I have full trust that the language that will be developed will be the right language for this bill. And as we sort of continue forward, we'll be looking at potentially some other bills that might be helpful in moving this forward. Does that get at your question, Dorothy?
It helps. Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Mandy Jo.
Yeah, 2 questions. I just want to clarify that my understanding is whatever comes to us will be the actual text of the equivalent of a bylaw, but at the State House, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly like
Yeah.
when we did ranked choice voting.
Just so everyone
Yeah.
understands that we're getting essentially a bylaw, but at the state level
Right.
that we'll have to then forward on. And have you talked, I know you've talked to Senator Comer and Mindy Dom and Representative Dom, but have you asked them whether they can get the State House legal counsel or drafting counsel to help us with this, since it's more of a state law than a bylaw?
That's an excellent question. Yes, I have spoken with Representative Dom about that, and I think she has a plan for reaching out to House Counsel to get some input and feedback on this. Yeah.
I think that, Mandy Jo, that's a very good question. And as we move along in the development of this proposed legislation, it's always good to have a back and forth between the legislators, their counsel, our counsel, because often what happens then is we file it, but then it gets changed in the process. And what we want to do is try to avoid that. Okay. Jennifer.
Yes, I actually had a similar question about, I was very encouraged to see that there's already been a conversation with our representatives, at the state level, and that they will, are eager to carry it forward. And so I just wanted to ask, so once, assuming it is approved at the state level, then it comes back to Amherst to really decide how we want to proceed with the reparations themselves. We've just been sanctioned to do that. Is that correct?
Not exactly. I think we're going to continue to pursue our work. So the AHRA will go about its business, and the African heritage community will begin to develop proposals that will come to the council. This is really a tool for us to be able to distribute benefits when the time comes.
Okay.
So this may take, some of these things can take a really long time, and we may be ready actually before that for some benefits to be distributed. So at that point, we'd have to discuss how we might do that. So not exactly, but I wouldn't say that this bill sort of gives us the right or not the right to move forward. It's just one way that we'll be able to distribute the benefits if approved.
The other thing is that our town council, our town attorney advised is that the committee continue to be, become clearer and clearer as to the kinds of things they're going to recommend that funding be provided for, so that those things, then we make sure that the bill covers all of those options. Okay. Are there other questions? Michelle, thank you to you, and again to the entire committee. This is tough work. You're doing a great job of moving it forward and checking in along the way for all of the right moves that need to get made. So thank you so much.
Yes, and we have one.
Yes, we do have a motion, please. Would you like to read the motion? I can do it if you'd like, and you can just second. Okay. To ask the town manager to begin the process of seeking special legislation to define reparations as a public purpose as described in the KP Law memo dated September 28th, 2021, and included in the March 7th, 2021 Town Council meeting packet. The town manager will seek guidance as needed from the African Heritage Reparations Assembly, AHRA, while drafting the petition, and will provide a copy of the proposed petition to the AHRA for review prior to submitting to the Town Council for approval to file with the state legislature. Is there a second?
Miller, second.
Thank you. And is there any other questions? Seeing none, we're going to move to a vote. I'm going to start with Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Mandy Johanicky.
Aye.
Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller.
Aye.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Aye.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Aye.
Alicia Walker.
Aye.
Shalini Baumilne is not present. It is unanimous, 12 in favor and 1 absent. Okay,
Thank you.
absolutely. We are ahead of schedule. God forbid, don't break it now.
Don't say it.
Okay, we're going to move on to the proposed residential rental bylaw registration permit inspection fee. And that is, I'm going to call on Mandy Jo Hannicky, who will make a presentation on behalf of the sponsors.
Yeah, it's going to be short, but myself, Councilors Miller, Rooney, Shane, and Taub are also part of this. It's a large group. And basically, the residential rental registration bylaw, rental property bylaw, has a part that says the council sets the fees. We've never set the fees. The fees were set before the council came into existence, but the council's never looked at them themselves. And so we are proposing that the council actually set fees. Right now, the current fee is $100 per property that has a rental on it, and there is no inspection fee. And so the proposal we have is to increase the fee to $250 per parcel, and allow essentially a discount, or you can think of it as keeping the $100 fee for any parcel that has a parcel that has a maximum of 6 rental units, with at least one of the units occupied by the owner of the parcel, would stay at $100. So owner occupied rentals would stay at $100, and then set an inspection fee of $150. The reasoning is set forth in the memo. I'm not going to go through it right now. This is not a proposal to change the bylaw itself. It is only a proposal to change the fees charged under the bylaw. So I would equate this proposal to something similar to the parking proposal bylaw, the parking fee proposal, not bylaw, that TSO is dealing with right now, which is to change the fees. And this group of sponsors believes, because it is solely a fee change, that it belongs in TSO, because the fees, that's sort of where fees go.
Okay, I'm going to make a comment in that I have debated whether this belongs in TSO, or because the comprehensive housing policy is assigned to to CRC, whether or not it, along with future things with regard to rental bylaws, would in fact be more appropriately with CRC. Either way, it still has to go to the Finance Committee because it is a fee. And that's why the motion shows both committees. I don't want to do both committees. That's a waste of people's time. But if there's any other opinion with regard to which committee, I'd be interested in hearing that before we make the motion. Anna.
Sure. I think it's more appropriate for oh my God, I'm pulling it together, y'all. I think it's more appropriate for it to go to TSO because, as Mandy said, this is not a bylaw revision. This is a fee structure. And so while finance is also appropriate, similar to the parking fee, parking permit fee increases, this should go to TSO, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other comments? Since the parties bringing this forward have thought TSO is the appropriate one, and we've heard one comment, then I will read the motion as follows: to refer the proposed revision of fees under General Bylaw 3.50 residential rental property to Town Services and Outreach Committee with input from the Finance Committee for a report to the Town Council by April 4, 2022. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gauthier.
Are there any other comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to a vote. And I will start with Anna.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer's an aye. Mandy Jo Hanneke.
Aye.
Hold on, I just lost my screen. Thank you. Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Yes.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Kathy Shane.
Yes.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Jennifer Taub.
Yes.
Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bell-Milne is absent. Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
It is unanimous with one absent. Okay. Doing well, keep on. We're going to deal with the town council meeting format. And I did send you all a email explaining this. Back, believe it or not, on the day we were all sworn in, we voted to meet in person. We voted that the public would not meet in the town room with us, but would continue to attend virtually and make public comment. We also voted to allow virtual public allow the public access. We did that. And we also voted that council committees would hold their meeting in a virtual format. All of that expires on April 1st. Now, since then, the governor has extended all of the possibilities of continuing to do this through July 15th. Regardless of what he has said, we have to make a decision about how we will continue as of April 1st. And so on your, I believe we still have to vote to suspend, right? So we have to vote to suspend, then we have to vote how we want to have our own meeting format. Then we have to vote about public access and we have to vote about committees. So I'm interested, not in whether or not we're going to vote tonight, although you can certainly voice your opinion to that as well, but thoughts about the first item about our continuing to meet in person, although allowing the virtual attendance as we have been doing. Kathy Shane.
I think continue to meet as we've done, but with one change, and I'm not sure how I would word this. I think it is a burden on staff to come in if the rest of us don't have to come in. So if we had some minimum threshold that we have to have at least name 5 counselors who are coming into the room, then it would be this, with the requirement that we all let you know in advance. So that makes it somewhat more complicated, but I feel like if we got down to 2 people in the room and we've got 3 staff people coming into the room because we've got 2 counselors in the room, so we allowed everyone to make a decision. And I must say, I am only not there tonight because I thought I had to get up really early tomorrow morning to go and be witness in a jury trial, and it got called off 5 minutes before the council started meeting. So I'm totally willing to come in, but I just thought we should have some out if we're going to continue to allow all counselors to be somewhere else than in the room. So that's a comment on and I have no idea how I would word that. So it's a suggestion of a way of being more humane to the staff, because we have to have, I even saw tonight, we run into these technical glitches when we're trying to be 2 places where some counselors are on Zoom and some are not in the room. So we've got Paul in the room, Athena in the room, and a technical person in the room to make sure this goes smoothly. So that's my observation.
Okay. Are there other comments? Dorothy.
I would like to continue as we are doing now because the meetings are very long and arduous and late, and to do so masked is very, very difficult. But I do echo Kathy's concern about, is there some way to minimize staff involvement? That's it.
Athena or Paul, do you have a suggested wording? Something like, the president can declare that the meeting will be virtual if by noon on whatever, something like that? It's something we have discussed after the last meeting.
And I want to credit Michelle Miller with this idea as we drove home after the snow last time. And she thought, what if we all decide not to come or only one of us comes? And trying to acknowledge that we can make that decision, but 3 other people cannot.
Lynn?
Yeah.
So I think what you could put a number on it, but you could also just leave it at the total discretion of the president to make a call by date certain, but time certain. The only, if we are not permitting the public into the room, the only people it impacts are staff and the counselors.
Right.
So
I'm fine with that, but I personally would like a guideline. Okay, so that there's no question as to why I am doing this. It does mean I'm going to have to get more careful to poll you earlier, and you're going to have to come forward with your responses earlier. Is there a suggestion? Pam Rooney, you have your hand up.
We were chuckling at the beginning of this meeting that several of us or I at least, did not vote to be here in person, and yet I'm one of the most consistent in-person people. And I was very happy having it fully virtual because people can hear us, people can see us, we can speak without having masks, and the staff, in fact, can work remotely as well. So it feels like it is easier all around to do it either completely virtual or just say, hey, everybody, let's come on in. There is no public here. They are not inconvenienced by having to, wait for the call each time. So if I had my druthers, I would probably revote to just simply do it virtually until a date certain, even though I've clearly showed up for the meetings here. Thank you.
Yes, we took a poll. There was actually 4 of us who have been in the room every night. Mandy Jo.
Yeah, I want the in-person, so I disagree with Pam, because if we continue to, yeah, maybe all virtual might be slightly easier, but if we're all in person and we all come here in person, but we don't allow the public, that's the same amount of work than if we do this hybrid. And so I have found it very valuable to not be at home during these meetings, to be here in person for a number of reasons. And so I don't want to lose that, especially as the pandemic is, I hate to say winding down because you can't predict anything, but as we learn more and restrictions are disappearing and things like that, I am okay with the addition of this option for the president to do so. I don't know what number I'd put on it. I wouldn't want it too high. There's like a sweet spot that I don't know what that sweet spot would be, right? But I would say that needs to be declared preferentially before, say, Sunday night, because there is many a time on a Monday where I don't look at my email afternoon because I'm just too busy, and so I would be one that would show up here and no one would be here. And the doors would be locked if it's done too late. So I think we have to have a hard deadline, but if we're going to put that into a motion, we as counselors also have to take the responsibility to let our president know what the intention is, because she can't make a informed decision if she receives no responses in a timely manner.
Anika.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. Yes, so I was also under the impression that we had voted to keep the meetings hybrid, not knowing what people's personal circumstances were and, what could come up, and also acknowledging that, for some, I can't remember which counselor pointed this out, that it is actually sometimes harder to meet at home for some people. Just not knowing the circumstances, and also just to add to Mandy Joe's point, maybe if we had, I don't know if this is too soon or people wouldn't know, but even the Thursday before, so that people would, we would have to let you know whether we'd be in person or not. And then maybe that could also be because we would have, staff wouldn't be finding out on a Sunday night whether they will extend their day Monday evening.
Okay. Thank you. Pat?
Basically, I feel that I'd like to not put a number there. I feel like if there's an upcoming storm, that would be a reason to hold a virtual meeting. I think it's critical that we have the option of being virtual. Some of us are wrestling with different health issues that make being in the room difficult. And that needs to be honored. But I want to go way back, because when we first decided this, we asked Sean and Athena what they preferred, and they preferred to work from home, but we ignored that. So, and I think we're still ignoring that. So I would like to see the whole thing be virtual.
Okay. Jennifer?
Yes, I know I initially voted it for it to be either way, because I felt that if counselors wanted to be in person, but every counselor had the option to be remote, that, why not give people the choice? I was coming in person until the snowstorm, and then when we were all remote that night, and it was such a difference not being masked. So that's why I've continued to be remote since then. But I would concur with Pat that I would really, like to see the staff not have to come in. And I guess I went to maybe 3 or 4 meetings in person, and since we tend to leave right after, I mean, it is nice being in person, but I didn't feel there was really that much time for it. So I think what there is to gain by being in person is outweighed by the imposition on the staff. So since we have the opportunity to do it remotely, and it may just be for a short period of time until July, I would rather see us be completely remote.
Dorothy?
I agree with Pat that we did not really listen to what the staff said. And I think we should. And I think we should be remote for a while longer. Thank you.
Mandy Jo?
I sometimes feel like you're not listening to your fellow counselors that don't want to be remote too. But it's only for a short time, has been 2 years to pretty much the day as of today. It keeps getting extended by the governor. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think when we made this vote as the former council back in July, it was, but it's only for a short time, 2 more months. We're now 9 months into that short time, looking for another summer when transmission rates in summers go way down. I mean, I don't know what to say other than for some of us, being in this room allows us to better concentrate and participate in the same way that for some of us, being at home allows you to better participate and concentrate. And one is not more important than the other. They're both equally important. And I am again, in a second council, urging us to allow each of us to choose which is the best for us to be our best counselor person always. And by going solely virtual, you're not allowing us, you're taking that option away from your fellow counselors.
Kathy?
You know, having made what I tried to say is there were a compromise on the staff. As you probably remember, I wanted to reconsider because I was all for going all virtual. So Lynn, I don't know how you're going to word this. It seems to me that we're hearing there are enough people who would like it to be all virtual. They feel this compromise of getting down to, for some reason, tonight's will be virtual and letting you decide it is not as satisfactory as all virtual. And I was originally for all virtual, and I do understand that that is limiting some people's choice, but I have not perceived a benefit of being in the room with other people. And if anything, when I'm in the room with other people with glasses and a mask on, I don't breathe very well and I don't see very well because of what it does to my glasses. So if we didn't have to have masks on, I would feel quite differently about it, but long meetings, the mask has an effect. So Lynn, I don't know how you want to do this because one motion seems to be to go to all virtual. And then we've got this modification of the in-person option. So I'm just saying that if I had a choice of voting on all virtual, I would vote on it positively.
Michelle has her hand up, and I'm going to make a motion.
I really want to support what Mandy Jo said and just share personally that I'm a single mom of an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. And it was incredibly challenging for me at the last meeting to be at home. I mean, embarrassingly so, if you knew what was happening. And what I had to do to ensure that I could focus and that I could be the best counselor that I could for my fellow counselors and the community. So I would ask, and this may be a very strange ask, but if we were to go all virtual, would there be a room somewhere here that would somehow be available that I could come to, or that, if Mandy wanted to come to, that I could be in my meeting, because I really don't have a place in my house that works. And so I wanted to share that experience.
Okay. I'm going to take two more because there are people who have not spoken. Andy?
Yeah, I'll just be really quick. I had been one who was a strong spokesperson for having meetings in person because of the kind of contact and human relationship development that can happen in between. I feel very badly that I have not been able to come to meetings recently in person. Wasn't my choice, but I think that it was something that I just had to do for health reasons. And I'm going to abstain regardless of what the motion is.
Okay. Anna?
Sure. So this is always a tough one to engage on, because I think for me, I don't want to, I have so much respect for Mandy and Michelle for sharing some of their reasons for wanting to be in person. And for me, it's not something I would like to share about my personal life in a public meeting. So I will put it out there that if anyone would like to speak with me about my personal reasons for why I concentrate better, all of those things in the room, I'm happy to speak with you offline about that. I think, Pat, your comment regarding respecting the staff is really important. And I think it's also important to ask Lynn to make sure that you're engaging with the staff that come to these meetings, maybe not in a public forum where they have to say it. I mean, Athena, I see your hand is raised and I'm super excited about that, but I also feel like we don't want to put our staff on the spot in this meeting when we are clearly all feel strongly in different directions, right? So I hope, Lynn, that you are speaking with our staff about their preference, because it's also constantly changing. We're not in the same place we were before. We aren't in the same place we will be in the next time we make this decision. So that's my 17 cents, I guess.
I am pleased to see that Athena has in fact raised her hand. Athena.
Thank you for calling on me. I just wanted to say that I deeply appreciate everyone's concern about my personal preference to meet at home, because I'm an introvert and being together with people is not the most comfortable thing for me, but it is absolutely not an imposition to ask me to be here to do my job. This is part of my job. Our meetings do happen in person, and I feel strongly that if our meetings are in person, that I should be here. So I would prefer not to frame it that it's an imposition on me to be here when our meetings are taking place here in the town room. It's part of my job, and I'm honored to be here with you.
Thank you for speaking up, Athena. Paul, was there anything you'd like to add?
I think that, I support what Athena says. Our staff will do whatever the council needs to do its work. I would note that the health director is looking at removing the mask mandate. And so that may change the situation. It may not. I don't know what everybody's individual circumstance is for wearing masks. It's not saying you can't wear a mask. It's just saying it's not required to wear a mask. We have not gone through what it would take in terms of opening up the building and increasing having the public here as well. So that, right now we have this room as a capacity of 40 people. That would mean the council could not spread out the way you have done. We would need space here for the public to sit if we allowed the public here to be present. So there's just some things we would work out. Whatever the council chooses, we would clearly support you.
Thank you. Dorothy?
I noticed that those people who were more in favor of in person were not glasses wearers. It's glasses wearers can't see because the glasses cloud up. But then, as Paul mentions, masks may be removed. Certainly if we sat spaced out without masks, I'd be okay with it. But if you're talking about back to normal with no masks, I still have problems. Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion. It's a motion very similar to what's on the screen. And I'm going to put in the blank 5 counselors. Okay?
We need to suspend the rules as well.
I'm sorry?
We need to suspend 8.4 as well.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to start with the motions. By the way, we also need a motion about the public. So the first motion I'm going to make is to suspend Town Council Rules of Procedure Rule 8.4 for the current agenda item. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gothier.
Okay, we need to vote. Let me find some space. We start with Griesmer and it's aye. Mandy Jo?
No.
Did you say no? You're not going to suspend it? No. Okay. Anika?
I'm sorry, can you clarify what we're suspending?
All we're doing is allowing us to vote tonight.
Without advance notice.
Okay, aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Dorothy Pam?
Yes.
Pam Rooney?
Yes.
Kathy Shane?
Yes.
Andy Steinberg?
Abstain.
Jennifer Chubb?
Yes.
Alicia Walker?
Yes.
Shelley Ball Mills absent. Pat DeAngelis?
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier?
Yep. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, that passes. 11 in favor, no, 10 in favor. 1 no, 1 abstention and 1 absent, okay? Did I get that correct? Thank you.
Yes.
The next one is effective immediately to hold all town council meetings in the in-person meeting format until July 15, 2021, with the option of virtual meetings if the president declares 24 hours in advance of a meeting that there will be fewer than 5 counselors physically present and with virtual public access until July 15th, 2022. Is there a second?
Second, Rooney.
Okay. Are there questions or comments? Mandy Jo.
I'm going to make a motion. I move to postpone this until the March 21st, 2022 council meeting. And I'll explain if I can get a second.
You're using your right.
No, I'm making a motion and I will explain if I can get a second.
A second, Devlin Gothier.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I think we might have more than one meeting scheduled that evening. Would you mind adding a time?
To the
regular
6:30 regular council meeting.
Yeah. Just say the regular council
Yeah,
meeting.
the regular council meeting, sorry. I have heard a number, I make this motion and I voted against the motion to suspend Rule 8.4 because I heard a number of counselors say that their potential decision on in-person or not depends on whether we're required to wear masks. That decision should be made within the next 2 weeks, potentially. That decision could affect how people vote on this, and our current vote goes till April 1st. So postponing until March 21st does not put us in any problems there. If I use my right to postpone, which I intend to do if this motion fails, and I'm just going to say that right now, this motion gets postponed to this Thursday's meeting at the council because it's a TSO council meeting, which is not ideal. And I do not want it moved to that meeting because that is not ideal, as we've seen before. And so I am moving to postpone this one to a time that makes more sense than using my right to postpone.
Are there any other comments or questions? The question on the table at this point is to postpone this motion that's on the screen until March 21st, 2022 at the regular town council meeting, since there will be a public forum that night as well. Is there any questions? Kathy?
As I understood what we were just told, is that we can vote on a motion to postpone. If we decide we don't want to postpone, the next thing we're going to have is the councillor saying they're going to use the nuclear option and we're going to postpone. So I feel like we're wasting our time. And I don't like a parliamentary maneuvers like this. If people want to vote to postpone and they say no, then we should be able to vote tonight. So I just object to having the rules used this way. I understand they can be used this way, but I do not think it's a good idea. And I would hate it if we all learn how to use the rules this way, because I don't think it's healthy for group dynamic.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Anna?
Sure. So Kathy, prior to this meeting, for a separate reason, I had the same concern you did about the right in the charter to postpone and how we might potentially start edging into overusing it. However, I think that the rationale here, I appreciate regarding the potential changes in masking. That may not change for individuals, but I think what Mandy noted was her rationale for using a motion to postpone, because if she does, everyone's coming to TSO on Thursday. So I think that was, in my mind, it was more of a courtesy just to let us know that it might happen, but so that we understand why the motion is until the 21st. Is that right?
That's correct. Dorothy?
Okay, well, the result of these kind of parliamentary maneuvers is that they leave me in the dust. And I really don't even know what I would be voting on at this moment. I don't even know whether to vote yes, no, or abstain and what they would mean. So, of course, sometimes I think that's the purpose of these maneuvers. Yeah, I agree with Kathy. This is not a game I like to play. So how can I not play this game? Thank you.
the motion on the floor merely means that we will take this up again on the 21st and not decide it to tonight. Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Mandy Jo?
I just want to say, I do not want to vote tonight, as that was clear, but if I use my right to postpone, we are showing up at TSO. I don't think it's wise to make everyone show up at TSO for this motion, which is why the only way I can get it to the 21st is to make a motion to postpone now instead of using my right to postpone. So I'm actually trying to be courteous to those who were not planning on showing up at the special council meeting this coming Thursday.
All right, the motion's on the table. It's to postpone until the 21st, at which point we will possibly have a different decision regarding indoor masking, although it does not mean you cannot mask, and I want to be very clear about that. You may still mask. I will personally share with you, I haven't decided if I will mask or not, based on my own circumstances, but nevertheless, the vote will not be until next 2 weeks from tonight, Monday, March 21st, 2022. Are there any more questions on what we're voting on?
Yes, if somebody chooses to not attend, are they still allowed to be remote?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're voting to postpone. Any other additional questions? Seeing none, I'm going to ask that we start with Mandy Jo.
Aye.
Anika.
Aye.
Michelle.
Yes.
Dorothy Pam.
Abstain.
Pam Rooney.
I guess aye.
Kathy Shane.
Abstain.
Andy Steinberg.
Abstain.
Jennifer Taub. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Shalini Bowman is absent. Pat DeAngelis.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
And Lynn Griesmer is an aye. It is 9 in favor, 3 abstentions, and 1 absence. Is that correct? Thank you. We're going to take a very brief break, 5 minutes. We'll be back here at 8. We're going to be back here at 8:27. How's that? No, 8:25. 8:25. We have 8 minutes. Please mute and turn your video off and put it back on when you come back in.
Recording in progress.
Would you just deal with the whole thing later? Yeah. Yeah. We'll just deal with the whole thing later. Hi, please, whoops, what have I done?
Leave computer audio.
Would help if I wear my glasses. Yeah. Yeah,
1 minute.
we still have 1 more minute.
It just changed. As you were finishing the word minutes, it changed to one.
Please put your video on so that I know you're back. Put your video on so we know you're back. It's in the memo. Oh, there was no test. I never did testimony. No. What I'm going to say is this, it's not testimony, it's a letter. It was the second page of the packet. Draft letter to DOER for authorization. No. I hear you. I hear you. And this other one, Andy wants to strengthen the statement. If I find that, if please turn your video on if you're back. We're waiting for Anika. We're waiting for, there's Alicia Paul. Pam Rooney, where's Pam Rooney? Pam, what do you mean? You're in the room socializing? I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. That's okay. Okay. We did. We got some nice socializing done. We don't do business. Okay. The town council meeting formats delayed. On the authorization, we need to go back and discuss the letter that would go to the joint chairs of the committee. It is in lieu of taxes, and Andy, you asked that this be withdrawn, so I'm going to ask to call on you.
Okay, thank you. I had some ideas on changes, just a small addition, and I can tell you what it is so that I don't create any mystery about it. And then I have a suggestion on how to amend the motion. What I was feeling it would be stronger letter if it had some language in there that explains that the town provides substantial services to the institutions, their students and employees in the nature of public service, public works, because we provide suitable roads to enable people to get to work, and other town services upon which the group that I named rely, and that we receive no taxation or no recognition of the need for revenue from those institutions. And I wanted to be able to suggest an addition to that. I didn't think it was a major change in the motion. I thought about amending the motion today, but then I realized that other members of the council may have similar requests that they might want to consider, I think we need to move this along fairly quickly. So that my motion would be to amend the motion that has been presented, which is an authorization for the town council president by adding the words after president, comma, after receiving suggestions from councilors through 5 p.m. on March 8, 2022. And so it would read, move to authorize the town council president, comma, after receiving suggestions from councilors through 5 p.m. on March 8, 2022, comma, to submit testimony on behalf of the town council regarding act relative to payment in lieu of taxation by organizations exempt from property tax, bills number S 1874 and H 3080.
Athena, do you happen to have a Word version you can put up? And by the way, this does not, it's a substitute motion because the original motion was not actually made. This will be the motion because the motion as printed on your motion sheet was never made. So the motion that we come up with up here will be the motion. It's not an amendment. Athena's looking for her Word document of the motions. I mean, I can read it. If
And if you can show the screen, I have it too.
Okay, there's the motion. No, that's not it. Right. So the motion would read is to authorize the town council president after receiving suggested changes from councilors through March 8 through 5 p.m. on March 8, 2022. And then it continues to submit. So in other words, I'll take suggestions from you. I'll make my best judgment, but this still authorizes me to go ahead and send it. Are there questions? Whoops, I can't see questions because I'm not in the right mode. There we go. Are there questions? None. Then I'm going to move that we go ahead with a motion as it has been presented. Did we get a second?
I'll second.
Oh, thank you. All right. Any other questions? If not, moving on. Let's start with Anika Lopes.
Aye.
Michelle Miller,
Yes.
Dorothy Pam,
Yes.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Kathy Shane,
Yes.
Andy Steinberg,
Yes.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Elisha Walker,
Yes.
Shalini Bell Mills absent, Pat DeAngelis,
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Mandy Johanicky.
Aye.
It's unanimous except for one absence. Moving on with our agenda. Paul, even though we have unanimously on the consent agenda approved the appointment of the new CREST director, we thought you might like to say a few words.
Oh, absolutely. So we're really excited to welcome Earl Miller as the new director of the Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service. We had a really strong applicant pool with 3 very, very strong finalists, and but Earl stood out in the opinion of the interview team and in my opinion for a number of reasons. And I also just want to thank the council for your expedited approval, because he's anxious to get started. He will be able to get started on March 21. So really fortunate to have Earl here. He brings a boatload of experience from his professional life, but also his lived experience. He knows what it's like to help and to be helped. He has worked with members of the homeless community. He has worked in the mental health field. He most recently was worked for the Department of Mental Health, and previously worked for the Center for Human Development. Brings a real fine interpretation of what's going on, and understanding of how to listen and how to be heard. His comments, I summarized some of his references in the appointment memo. His people who've worked with him have really admired his leadership capacity, but also the way he's worked with them as well. He has been selected to give keynote speeches. He has written blogs on racism and mental health. Is really interested. One of the things that was really compelling is that he's really interested in this job. He's been following what we've been doing. He's watched every meeting of the Community Safety Working Group, which helped inform his opinion about how we were approaching the challenges that we're facing, and he wanted to be part of this. He's excited about, I should be careful, he's in the audience, so which sort of shows his commitment, right? So even though we've texted already tonight that the appointment is confirmed, he's still there. So everyone who's met him has just been blown away by him, and I can't wait for you to meet him, because I think he's going to be a tremendous addition to the community. And he even talked about him bringing up members of his family to start to say, could we be part of this community, to live here? Because he wants to be really vested and sees his future here. So really thrilled to have someone of his caliber interested in working on this program and building the CREST program. So.
Thank you, Paul. And first of all, Earl, welcome. It's nice that you're in the audience. We know at some point we'll see you either in person or online. I want to really, again, just applaud the Community Safety Working Group for putting this all forward. This is a real milestone. It's a huge step forward. Alicia's on the council with us, and other members have been part of visiting with all of this. And Alicia, would you like to say something? Sure, go ahead.
Yes, I did just want to make a brief statement and say thank you to Mr. Bockelman and to the interview team. This is something that I've been very anxiously anticipating for quite some time, and it's quite a feeling I can't really describe, to see something through to fruition like this. And then also to see that when it was sort of out of my hands and I'm worrying about it like it's my child, that it is still being carried through with thought. And I am thrilled at the presentation of this person for this role. And I was thrilled at the experience, the cover letter, the resume, everything. And so I am very much looking forward to this process. I am very hopeful for the program. And I just really thank the interview team, because I think you all, I mean, I have yet to meet him as well, but based on what I have been presented, I think that this is a fantastic choice.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. And again, Earl, we welcome you. Okay, we have no town council appointments. We're going to committee and liaison reports. CRC, Mandy Jo?
Nothing new to report. We haven't had a meeting since last week's council meeting.
Okay. Kathy, elementary school building, brief?
We have continuous meetings, unlike Mandy. So no, we met last Friday and saw initial cost estimates that I want to stress these are very, very rough preliminary, just allowing us to start thinking about the 4 alternatives. The school committee meets on Tuesday night, as I mentioned earlier, with a vote on the education program, which is directly linked to the space summary. And then the building committee will be meeting this Friday at 8:30 with a vote on the overall package. And the key thing, just to make clear what we're voting on now, we're not voting on a decision in terms of any of the options, or even to say, this is the final ingredients of all the options. So, for example, will there be geothermal or air source heat pumps? But we are voting to move this forward, that these are where we're going to be considering to have the building. 2 sites, either ad reno or new, and that's really the package. So that package will be voted on, and if it moves forward, that means we'll be submitting to MSBA. And then that they will have feedback. They always have feedback. They read every sentence we write. But that allows us to move forward with the much more detailed look at the pros and cons and UNESCO to allow them to start to actually do design. They haven't really been doing design yet. They've been giving us really best fits on what's possible. So they've declared both these sites as possible, as feasible, and given us some timelines on if we go one way or the other. So we'll have our work cut out for us. But this week, there is also the community forum, as Lynn mentioned, and the community forum will be just after the school committee meets. So they will be presenting a combination of what the school committee has decided and what we will be looking at on Friday.
Dorothy.
So you're still looking at both? No
Yes.
decision is made. When is that decision going to be made? Because
June.
this is so,
June.
as an onlooker, it just seems like such a expensive, long drawn out process to do 2 or 3 things instead of making the decision earlier.
So I'll explain, Dorothy, it's actually a pretty quick process because this started in January. The design team has been out taking soil samples, doing drilling, looking at the conditions of the buildings, trying to figure out whether it would be possible to build a consolidated building on the site while leaving the current school operating. So that's could it fit? Because we don't have any place to move the children. So if we did any kind of phased building, it would take much longer to build. So they have been pulling together asbestos looks at the building, various traffic studies to look at this. So what will happen now between March and really May is getting down to that, what we think is the best choice. And we're just moving into 2-story or 3-story. How do the spaces fit on the site? And decisions about the energy systems. It makes a big difference. For example, if we do geothermal, they have to drill wells, and there's a special expensive kind of construction inside the building. If we go a different route, that expense goes away, but we have more repair costs. They don't last as well. So it's a plus and a minus and we don't have enough information yet to inform that decision. So when I say June, we're going to be having to be making it in the May and then make a final decision in June. So it's a lot of information that has to be put in front of us before we move to the next step, which is starting to design the building.
Kathy, could you just send me an email or the council an email that tells us when the subcommittees meet? I'm particularly interested in that Zero committee.
Right.
And when and the link for that. So
okay, so the next one has not been scheduled yet. We're trying to get over this, but it will be hopefully toward the end of this month, and I will send everyone a link. And I just want people to know that if you want to see what that discussion has been like, we have, if you go to the elementary school building committee webpage on the town, there is a subcommittee web piece, and all the presentations are there trying to explain the steps they're going through. And the next step will be starting to compare these systems, Lynn, on getting more information. That committee will not be making decisions, but it will be making a recommendation up to the full committee. So
Yes.
it's a very interesting set of discussions.
Great, thank you. Finance committee?
Well, the report is really the written report that was in the packet already. So instead of talking for much, I'm going to actually just see if there are any questions that councilors have about it now. it was the intent of the Finance Committee that the report be available to TSO for the public hearing on the 10th, and that it be presented, if possible, during an introductory part of the public hearing, so that it's information before the public, and that based upon comments received at the public hearing, that the Finance Committee would then want to revisit it for one last time at its next meeting. But I think that the report is complete. I want to thank Kathy in particular for helping me to get it written in the form that you saw it. So I'll stop there and just, if there are no questions, there's nothing else to report.
And we did mention, well, I mentioned it in a moment, so just forget I said that. GOL. Michelle?
Yes. So we had the student debt resolution that has now been withdrawn for now, which had passed unanimously. And I just want to thank the community sponsor in Roadwalt for bringing that forward and for joining us in the meeting. We also passed the swim proclamation, and thank you to Councilors Devin Gothier and Councilor Walker. I also want to note that I believe Councilor Pam wanted to support that, and maybe it may have been too, I'm not sure if it's too late or not, but I did get an email today on that. I also wanted to restate that we do have a resolution coming forward supporting the people of Ukraine. It was brought forward by a community member and friend, Pete Mackey. So we'll be reviewing that this week. And we will continue our review and hopefully finish our review of the rules of procedure and the standing committee structure. I think I covered it all.
Child abuse.
Indeed, yes. And the child abuse proclamation will be reviewed. And that is all happening on Wednesday. And I should note that wasn't a scheduled meeting. So it was a meeting that we added. And depending on how it goes, we may or may not have a meeting on the 16th as originally planned.
Okay. Anika, Jones Library.
Yes, so last week, the building committee met and welcomed new member Alex Lopez, which was exciting, and he'll be joining the outreach subcommittee. And the design subcommittee met as well, and they reviewed the existing design and talked about steps going forward, or the process going forward rather. And the outreach committee will have its first meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. from 4 to 5 p.m.
Thank you. Any liaison reports? I'm sorry. Oh, I just jumped right over. Dorothy, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to miss you.
There's not much to report that you haven't heard. We have a public hearing at 7 before our, which is I gather a full town council as well as TSO meeting on the permit parking recommendations and revisions. And that's about on-street permit parking and parking in lower Boltwood garage. I think we have other things that we're considering, but I have no reports. We did not meet since the last meeting. So I gave it before.
Are there any questions about the committee meetings before we go on to liaisons? Pat, is your hand up for liaison? Mandy Zhao.
Yeah, I have a question of the TSO chair and TSO. I received an email from the chair of the Board of License Commissioners today seeking an update on lunch carts and our referral. I gave her the update as it stood, but there is part of that referral that was transitioned to this council, the part that deals with parking spaces and reservation for lunch carts for parking spaces. That's on TSO's transition list with a formal referral from the council. And I'm wondering when TSO will get to making a recommendation on how to change our public ways policy as it relates to lunch cart regulations and reservation of the parking spots on the public way, not the sidewalks.
That we have definitely taken that very seriously, but we were presented with the on-street permit parking, which is a complicated piece. So we have not been able to start on that. I think as soon as we complete the permit parking revisions that we will be looking at that. I'm not sure if it's going to be the first thing, but it's definitely on the list of things to do very soon. So thank you.
And specifically, what we would be doing in that case with TSO is amending, I'm saying this as a question, Mandy Jo, amending the parking policy of the town council.
Amending the town council policy on the delegation of
Public way.
public ways or delegation of reservation of public ways. So
Okay.
it's amending our own policy to allow the Board of License Commissioners to essentially regulate for the purpose of lunch cart reservations. We did it for sidewalks in December.
Right.
And we never got to parking spots like metered parking, and the board would really like to finalize their regulations. And they can't do that until we deal with the other half of that referral.
Okay.
So Mandy Jo, we brought up all of those issues and we were told by
Dorothy, you muted.
we
Dorothy.
brought that up and talked about that in detail, and we were told that it was complicated this is by Sean and Paul, and needed to be looked into in a couple of aspects that we couldn't, originally we thought we could just do a referral. And we were told, no, we can't just do a referral. So this is definitely something we're very aware of what you say, but we were told that we had to wait our time to do that until we had finished what we were doing and they had time to give us advice. So thank you.
All right, we'll get it done. Any further questions for council committees before I go to liaison reports? Pat?
Yes, I wanted to express the Disability Access Advisory Committee's deep gratitude to the Amherst Pelham Regional Schools for implementing the disability studies curriculum. So, and we'll be meeting tomorrow at 11:30.
Thank you. Mandy Jo, I believe your hand is up. Andy?
At Transportation Advisory Committee, I did attend first meeting after being designated to be the liaison from TSO and the council. And what the discussion was a very good discussion. They are preparing a report to the council regarding their activities and what they talked a little bit about the work plan. The work plan are all issues that the council has been previously aware of, except for one. So I'll just mention that additional one. Amherst College, as we know from the poll hearing and otherwise, it's building a new building on the west side of South Pleasant across the street from the campus. And their design shows a crosswalk there. And TSA has become very concerned about the design of that crosswalk for safety reasons and cited during their discussion the unfortunate incident at the University of Massachusetts on Commonwealth Avenue, where a student was recently killed as a pedestrian. So that they have put that high on their list of topics that they would like to discuss and then present to the council at a future date, the question of the crosswalk design.
Okay.
So that's it.
Thank you. Michelle?
I just wanted to flag that there's a Board of Health meeting this Thursday, March 10th at 5 p.m. And I have had a chance to sit down with Jennifer Brown and Nancy Gilbert so far, but there haven't been any meetings since I've been assigned as liaison.
Great. Dorothy?
I want to make a comment about what Andy just said. This relates to something that was in the town manager's report. The night that the young woman was killed while in a crosswalk, I was driving from the northern area, and there was no visibility. There was fog. There was rain. It was terrifying driving. When I was coming down, so when I hit Deerfield, they had spent a lot of money on their roads recently, and they put those little reflector lights in the middle of the road, and that was the first time I even knew where the road was. I couldn't even tell where the edges of the road were, and I know that we've got a lot of money and a lot of plans on fixing roads, and I want to say, I love those reflector lights. It was terrible what happened to that young woman. The more reflective things that we have showing that there's a crosswalk at the sides and on the streets, the better it is. Because it was a terrible night for driving. It was a terrible night to be out. And I'm really terrible that she lost her life.
Paul, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. It's my understanding from talking to officials at UMass that the person was not in a crosswalk and that they were walking on the side of the road. So the accident happened without, people keep saying the woman was in a crosswalk. That's not true. She was walking on the side of the road, and it was a total unfortunate accident. And it was very hard. The visibility was very near zero, like Dorothy said.
Michelle, did you have your hand up still?
No, but my computer is frozen, so I may get booted and I'll open up on my other laptop if that happens.
Got it. Kathy.
I'm going on to new topic, Lynn. I was just going to give a brief, what we've been hearing at JCPC. So I don't know when you would want to hear that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we will be meeting every Thursday until the end of this month, and you can see the agendas. But one of the things that's been coming up is how COVID and supply chains are affecting our capital purchases. You can plan on buying a vehicle in August and you can count on getting delivery in March of the next year at a higher price than you originally thought. So it's been pretty impressed on us that what the volatility in the supply chain is meaning for how we plan our purchases. So it's been a repetitive theme. So I just wanted to alert. We had one vote that we took earlier this year where we had agreed to purchase a particular equipment, and it turned out the actual price tag was much higher and we had to augment it. So we're also thinking of with Sean's help, figuring out how to avoid that. But I think Mandy and Anna are both for us, the council, we're hearing this from each department. So it's not coming from any one place.
And Athena, we need to add in between D and E, JCPC for the rest of this month. Okay. Anna.
Sure. I appreciated what Michelle did, letting us know when the next meeting was. ECAC has not had a meeting since I was appointed their liaison, but they do meet this Wednesday at 4:30. Thrilling agenda topics, y'all. So tune in.
And Jennifer?
Well, I guess I should add that the Amherst Affordable Housing Trust has not met since our last council meeting, but we'll be meeting this Thursday and it conflicts with TSO. So I'll confer with you offline, Lynn, about how to handle that if I could.
Okay. Great. I just want to commend all of you for making the connections. We have no meetings to approve. And Paul, town manager's report.
Thank you. So last Saturday was the infamous first weekend in March. There was a lot of activity. There was some hope, I think, that this would start to dwindle down, this event, but it turned out to come back with great gusto. There were 37 medical transports during the day. On Saturday, 23 that were directly connected to the partying by the students. There were 6 arrests made, basically for people who they have a very low tolerance or very high tolerance for activity. The idea when they talk to the officers is students are here, they want to have fun. We try to help them be safe, but some people still go over the line even with that. There's some after action analysis that's will happen today, and there'll be additional after action analysis to help inform how we address this going forward through the rest of the school year this year, and also for next year for the first weekend in March. But just I do want to commend our police, Captain Ting, who organized it, had a very detailed plan prepared, communicated that well to all of our partners. Tremendous work by the police department, and a lot of work done by the fire department for that day. They also at the same time had a hockey game where they had they always have a paramedic on duty for the hockey teams, but then we also had a triage center set up, anticipating that there are many people coming in who might have already participated in partying, and would be able to assess them when they got to the Mullen Center. So that was very busy as well. But again, really professional staffing. We had 5 ambulances running all day. So it was a busy day. Let you know that I think in my town manager report, the East Street, the bid award for the East Street School and Belchertown Road project, which is one bid, we're expected to award that in the very near future, possibly this week. So that's exciting. That's going to be really exciting news for folks. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, and Michelle mentioned, the Board of Health is meeting on Thursday. At that meeting, the health director will be making her assessment of what should be happening going forward. The Board of Health can accept it, overrule her. She basically works within the direction of the Board of Health, but they've delegated a lot to her, but she wants to make sure that they were fully engaged in the decision that would happen going forward. I did mention, I wanted to say it out loud though, the Mary Maple, the tree warden has determined that tree cannot survive and should not be. It's becoming more and more of a hazard. That's something that we will bring to the public in June. So just wanting to start to lay the groundwork that that's coming forward. Pleasantries, which is our newest adult use marijuana shop, opened at the corner of Amity and University Drive on Saturday. So it's a nice facility, and they're excited to be open. And their neighbors, interestingly enough, the Master Alternative Care, which is just a few doors down, we're happy that they're open too. I think there's this sort of agglomeration concept that you will go to this area to find your marijuana. So they're hoping to do a terrific business. We haven't seen an announcement from the state. We've been asked not to talk about this too much, but we have received a parkless grant that allow us to about $80,000 to allow us to put 2 very nice looking dining areas in parking spaces. And these will be at the same level as the sidewalk. So it'll look much more professional than having Jersey barriers there and things like that. So we're really excited about getting these things up and running. We are in discussions with the bid about how much of the public way will be utilized for outdoor dining, especially if the mask mandate goes away. Will restaurants be looking for that? We think outdoor dining is a real positive for the community, but we don't want to create outdoor dining venues and then not have the restaurants use it. So the restaurants have to be willing to utilize it as well. I just want to clarify something. So earlier tonight, we talked about the solar study fund. So we have about $75,000 in this year's budget possible for a solar study. The solar study is estimated at being at $80,000 to $100,000. So if we can make some adjustments to it, utilize our own town staff to do some of the GIS work, if we can get the bid out this year, we will. So I just want to clarify that, while it's estimated at 80 to 100, we do have 75,000. We had to put aside $100,000 for sustainability work. We spent 25,000 for some work on the ambulance, the anti-idling tech batteries. And so just want to be clear about that.
Okay, are there questions of the town manager, Mandy Jo?
3. Can you explain, we got an E&D letter regarding the regional school that came to the email, and I think I understand what that means. I think it means that we won't need to pay about 300 some thousand of our assessment this year, which means I guess we will be under budget for that and it'll end up in free cash, but I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. And if there's any potential talk about using that for future school needs, potentially capital or anything like that, or if anything's been talked about that way. Polling locations, your manager report keeps saying that letters are going to go out from the town clerk in April. We only have one March meeting left and it's always taken 2 meetings to get through polling locations. So I'm getting concerned that we won't have enough time to discuss them before they send letters out, that it might be an ambitious timeline. And the Pelham Public Safety discussion that you talked about, I guess I don't know what the discussions are going on, but I just want to mention that I would be concerned that if we take on that responsibility, that we ensure that we are being paid by Pelham for the entire cost of the additional costs for that: gas, wear and tear on vehicles, staffing, overtime, all of it, because our taxpayers shouldn't be burdened in providing an extra service to Pelham.
Sure, great questions. Yes, the $300,000 for the school is their E&D, which is essentially their free cash that comes back to the town flip and goes to our free cash. There have been no discussions about what to do with that. It would have to be appropriated by the council. The polling locations, what we are expecting to get something back from the state. We're scheduled for the 21st for a presentation to the council. If you act on that meeting or the next meeting, the 7th, I think it is April 7th, or even then later in April, it can still, you would have 3 meetings to go through it. We're not looking at any changing polling locations. All the polling locations are the same. It's just a matter of who goes to which polling location, but you have the right to choose which polling locations. There aren't a lot of options out there. But it's really just confirming the 10 polling locations we have in their locations.
I want to clarify, Paul. Voters don't have the right to choose which polling location. The council.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Has
Yeah.
the right to choose.
Yeah.
polling
I missed.
location.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. The Pelham Public Safety Study. So their chief is retiring in 2023. Like any good community, their select board is saying, well, is there a better way can we regionalize services? Is this an opportunity for us? And so they wanted to have a conversation. They had a conversation at their select board meeting because they have a 3-member board. They can't have a conversation without it being a public meeting. I felt it was important to notify the council that they've approached us saying, what would this look like? We had the exact same questions you had. We can't subsidize this with the town of Amherst employees, taxpayers. We're looking at their calls, things like that. What are their options? There are 2 ways to look at it. One is to say, if you wanted a level of service that we provide to our members, what would it cost you? And here's the price tag for that. Or to say to them, what do you spend on public safety? Give it to us and we'll tell you what we can provide with that under that budget. So we are looking at this, and of course it's a regional agreement. It would require town council approval, but it's pretty early in the stages. Normally I wouldn't have talked about it, except that they had talked about it at a public meeting.
Pam.
I wondered, we talked about the new Pleasantries opening. How many actual operating marijuana businesses are in Amherst now?
So we have one medical only, which is at Rise, which is on Meadow Street. We have one Red Cardinal, which is on College Street. We have Pleasantries and Mass Alternative Care, which is on University Drive. I feel like I'm missing one.
Yes, the one up in North Amherst.
That's Rise.
Rise
Rise.
isn't,
On Meadow Street.
Rise isn't medical only though. It
Yeah,
is.
They,
Oh,
they,
it is now.
they converted, they decided that was their niche. Yeah.
Thanks.
It was a good location for Rise, but a company can only hold 3 licenses in the state. And they determined that they were getting enough use of the medical market there, and they had other locations that they wanted to use their retail license for.
Okay. Jennifer?
Yes, I had noticed, I guess on a couple of other agendas where you, included the strategic partnership agreements with the university and the colleges were in process. And I was just wondering, because I think the last agreements were entered into 2017 or 2018. So I was just wondering if they usually take that long, and if not, if there were particular items that were sort of keeping the discussion going.
So the only strategic partnership agreement that ever happened was with the university. There was never strategic partnership agreements explicitly with either of the colleges, and we're trying to get all three institutions to enter into them. And so, yes, it takes long. We were in negotiations with the university some time ago, and then COVID hit, and everybody who was doing the negotiations sort of had other things and prioritized that instead of these negotiations. But we're back at it now. And having pretty productive conversations. So hopefully get something that we can bring to the council for your review.
Okay, so it was COVID that stopped it. I couldn't imagine that they were continuing for 3 years. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was part of it, but I mean, it's also, you know, it takes a lot of time and effort to go through it. And it was, we had some staffing change. Our economic development director, Jeff Kravis, was the lead person. And then when he left, now we have Sean Mangano on staff, and so he is participating with Dave Zomack in continuing with these conversations.
Thank you.
Dorothy?
I have a couple of points. The first one is I want to express my surprise. The name of the residence at 132 Northampton would be East Gables. It is on the western border of Amherst. Is this a Northampton-centric naming? I just think that people in the town of Amherst be very confused to have something called East Gables when it's at the western edge of town. So that's point one. Point two, the thing on the census and the voter registration, and I'm a little bit confused because voters, everybody is in the census. Everybody who lives here should be counted in the census, but they're not all voters. Now, one of the voter books that I get sometimes does show that a list of names and then puts an asterisk next to the name of a person who's a registered voter. I just want to make sure that it really is not just a voter list, but it's all the people who live in the town. And the third thing is, I read your report with interest on the first week of March, and I had been actually slightly downtown in the morning and the evening, and it had been very quiet. So that then I read your email and saw that the noise and party had been elsewhere. But there was coverage on Channel 3 that evening, which was I don't know if you caught it. It was very funny. It was some guy saying, oh yeah, you know, Blarney Brass, we missed it for a couple of years because of COVID, but oh yeah, we had it. It was wonderful. It was just great. And so, you know, I'm glad you had your team out there in full strength, because it was clear that somehow this was a sign of normality to the students, that they be able to have this crazy party and that you allowed them to have it without, you know, too much damage and hurting themselves. So kudos to the town and to the police and fire department on that.
So I don't know why they named it East Gables. I'm sure there's some logic to the building or something that they're doing. I can find out about that though. In terms of the voting list, so the census is, what the Secretary of State needs is when you put in an address, you say, where do I vote? If you put it into address into the state database, it tells you where you're going to go. So we want to make sure that every address and every apartment is captured in that. And then we send something out to all the people who are in the census. And if you're a registered voter, we're trying to put it all together so there's one mailing, and our town attorney has had some really good suggestions about how to highlight it so it doesn't get lost. Some people throw things away if it doesn't look official or something like that. So we're having some discussion about exactly what will go into the mailer to make sure that people see where they're voting, because the voting locations may not change, but the people who vote there will change, because the council adopted new districts and precinct lines. So where you might have voted before, you might vote at a different location this time.
Anna?
All right. I know you're excited to hear this question.
Mm-hmm.
We're very close on Hickory Ridge. Can you please define very close?
Days.
How many?
I don't
Days can go for a very long time, Paul.
It has been taking, so yeah, there are a lot of little things, and there were some regular, I mentioned last time, regulatory things from the DOER that we need to get approved. You know, the paperwork has all been done. The attorneys, all the sets of attorneys who have had to review it have reviewed it. So there's just a lot of different documents. Yeah, it's
All right, days.
I can tell you some details though.
It's okay.
Dave
It might be
Zolmak-
entertaining.
In a meeting today, Dave Zomek was really excited and he confirms the days.
Yeah.
All right, but I will
So-
just say there are 365 days in the normal year. So anyway,
Yeah, hopefully you only need one hand.
God, I hope so. Okay,
So
thank you.
it's the sale is for $520,000, 149.87 acres of land that town will be purchasing. Easement for I believe it's 6.44 megawatts of solar. There'll be 3,500 I shouldn't be saying these, I should really confirm these, but like of battery storage as well on site. So I think the numbers are done. Everything is in agreement.
That's great. Thank you. The other thing, if I can do one more, I wanted to commend you and your staff on the quick little note in there that was placement of yield signs on the South Amherst Common. Thank you. This is something that I know District 5 has been asking for a long time. And when I was still campaigning, I held office hours there and it was terrifying. So not in the road, on the Common, but thank you for appreciate it.
So that's required under the town council policy that report. And so we now have a better system with our DPW that they sort of document all the warrants that they have to follow the uniform manual of traffic codes or something in order to place certain things. So when they look at it, they say, does it meet the warrants? And then if it does, then they present it to me and then I report that to the council. So.
And if anybody wants to quiz Dave Zomak on Hickory Ridge, he's in the audience.
He's probably yelling at me for what I said.
Are there any other questions of Paul at this time? Okay. Then we'll move on to counselor comments. So I sent you a report. You might have questions about it. And then I also want to just review the expected agenda items for the 21st. Are there any questions on the report? I hope you all needed something to put you to sleep. Okay. On March 21st, we are anticipating 3 meetings. The first will be at 5:30. It's what we will call a working session. For the purposes of actually calling a meeting, we may call it as a special town council meeting because it will not have public comment, but there won't be any votes as far as I know. And it will be on beginning discussing of a rental bylaw. And Mandy Jo, do you have any other comments about that?
We'll have the sponsors that are working on a draft revision to that bylaw will have a memo to the council soon. Hopefully we'll finalize that memo tomorrow, but it really is an attempt to figure out whether we're, to do a first working session, try it out, but also to get ideas. We know the sponsors that are working on this know there's a lot of interest in the rental registration bylaw, and to comply with open meeting law, we wanted to have a discussion with all of the counselors at a time as we draft potential changes to it.
Okay. I just want to alert all of you to the fact that that meeting is 1 hour. And so you may want to figure out a way that you're going to be asking for input that might exceed what people would discuss during 1 hour. That discussion, again, will be counselors only. There may be future discussions where we ask different committees or staff to attend, but at this point, it's counselors only. At 6:30, we will have a public forum on the Community Preservation Act Committee recommendations. All recommendations are coming forward for that public forum. The Finance Committee has made a recommendation for all but 2 of those. The 2 that they have not made a recommendation for, however, are still under consideration, and the public forum will include those. Okay. Then at sometime after that, we'll have a regular town council meeting. On that agenda, we have 2 proclamations already spoken to tonight. We'll have a potential vote on the CPA recommendations. We will have a presentation by Sue Audette on voter locations if she's ready. We will have public way requests coming regarding the farmers market and the mobile market. And if those are clean, we might be able to make those recommendations or approve those requests in the meeting. Paul, are we going to do sewer regulations on the 21st, or is that delayed?
No, we'll be, if we can, I know the council wants to get it well in advance, and we talked about this morning, if we can get it early next week, which I
Yes.
think we will, it'll be for the 21st, yes.
Okay. Sewer regulations, and then there's also a Kendrick Park update and some unfinished issues with regard to Kendrick Park that Guilford Mooring, the superintendent of public works, is involved in. We may have a recommendation from TSO on parking permit regulation changes, and if we don't, it'll just defer to the next meeting. And then from GOL, we'll see whether we have anything with regard committee structures or rules of procedure. Right? It's a full agenda. Come prepared. Are there any other questions at this time? Anna?
Oh, it's a counselor comment. I don't know if
Okay,
that's allowed to.
moving on to counselor comments. Actually, I have one, and that is Patty Angeles and I, as District 2 counselors, are having a District 2 meeting next Monday night. All are invited, and especially we encourage the at-large counselors to come. It will be virtual. It's at 6:30. Pat, did you want to add anything else to that comment?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I hope as many people as possible from the council will come, make the discussion interesting.
And I've actually been to 4 other district meetings, so it's been very interesting. Anna?
Okay. I want to, well, I'm sure, I'm happy to become the sports writing proclamation person, but want to congratulate the UMass women's basketball team on their first A10. Last night they won the A10 championship for the first time in 24 years, which I'm guessing is older than all of the players on the team. So they're going to the first NCAA tournament in 24 years. And so on the 13th, you can find out who they're going to play, but congratulations to them. It's amazing.
And my niece that works for ESPN is doing the girls' basketball tournaments. So there you go. She loves women's sports. Is there anything else? I keep thinking there was one other comment I wanted to make, but I don't think so. It is 9:24 and we are adjourned.
Yay, Lynn. Thank you all.
Thank
Night.
you. Good night.